Welcome back to another episode of Sisters Talk Chisme. I'm your host, Daniela.
I'm Michelle.
And I'm Kelly.
And we're going to go ahead and dive right into today's podcast. But before we get started, I wanted to talk about Coachella. Because I've been having mad FOMO this week and last week of Coachella. So when this video goes up, it would have already been second week of Coachella over with. So first week of Coachella was honestly quite a mess. And I'm going to be talking about the K-pop portion of it, but obviously there's some other artists on there. But the K-pop portion of it, ATEEZ and LE SSERAFIM performed at Coachella. And they performed again this weekend, which is for us yesterday. They performed, and let's just say there was a lot of backlash to LE SSERAFIM. I don't know if you've heard, but because of their vocals, apparently. And I know it's a very controversial topic, but again, I'm just gonna say what I've heard about on Twitter of what happened. But essentially, LE SSERAFIM performed, and their vocals were just not the best that they could have been.
Yeah. On TikTok, you see the videos, and they're just like, ooh, auto-tune is there.
Yeah.
You need that.
Yeah, and a lot of people were kind of dissing because and honestly, LE SSERAFIM right now is the biggest hated K-pop group actually right now.
Because of that?
Yeah.
No, just in general, LE SSERAFIM in general, right? Currently has been a pretty hated K-pop group.
It's just added fuel.
By I think both Korean fans and international. I don't know. There's always a group every year or every cycle that people just hate on. So Blackpink performed at Coachella last year, and actually they were hated on too prior to that. So people are saying it's the Coachella curse or something like that, but now that LE SSERAFIM was really bad, people are trying to bring back Blackpink's performance at Coachella. See, you guys need to be better, this and that. And it's okay, yeah, but this is also their first time. And I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I feel like their vocals could have been better. But then again, I don't know, right? I don't know what it's like to sing and dance at the same time.
Right. I mean, when I heard them, because I saw it on TikTok and everything, I kind of feel like I would be like that. I would sound out of breath and all that stuff. And I can imagine, when I mess around and sing and dance, I'm out of breath. I'm like, I can imagine them.
That's
where them?
in parties and stuff.
For real.
Just dancing, I'm out of breath. I'm sweating and everything.
Yeah.
For real.
Bajé 5 libras just doing that.
That is true, yeah. So I don't know. I just wanted to bring that up. And also ATEEZ, although I love ATEEZ, and ATEEZ performed. They performed at Coachella, and theirs was good. The only thing that people were criticizing was the camera work from ATEEZ.
Yeah.
And this, which they performed yesterday, and I saw it all on Twitter, the cameraman came back better than ever. He was actually, I think, obviously
redeemed.
Redeemed himself. He took a lot of hate for it, so I feel really bad. But I mean, it's hard to capture all of them moving all the time because
but not even I saw the first time that they were actually doing it, and I'm like, that was a terrible job. Even my mom could record better.
Yeah.
No offense, and I'm like, no, that was terrible.
Yeah, they were pretty bad. I'm not gonna lie, but So I just wanted to touch a little bit on Coachella because obviously it happened this week, and I was getting mad FOMO about it because I really wanted to be there.
Yeah.
Same. When I heard the ATEEZ playing Bouncy, I was like,
yeah, but apparently, rumor has it, they are going on tour pretty soon.
Yeah.
So exciting.
yeah. Didn't they announced it there, right?
They announced they announced it. So I think it's Jung Ho was the one that said oh, I can't wait to see you guys maybe in the summer.
Let's catch up in the summer.
On tour, he said, and I'm like, bruh, he basically teased it, right?
Right.
No official, but they did today release the comeback of a full album.
Oh,
so with a comeback usually is
I think I did hear about it.
A concert. So who knows? We might get one, and
hopefully
we go. So anyway, so I kind of have a few topics that I would kind of like to hit on. I don't know if there's going to be a specific topic for today's podcast, but in general, just something. I don't know. I have some ideas, so Something that I kind of think about a lot is having a full-time, like, and maybe Kelly not really relate to this because Kelly doesn't have a full-time job, but like having a full-time, like, professional job as like the age that we are. And how does that feel? Like, and also even maybe just being a K-pop stan, like, because I mean, a lot of our podcast is going to be kind of about K-pop, but even just in general, like, for example, just to say, like,
yeah,
sometimes I sit in these meetings, like, I'm not gonna say what my position is, but I work in basically higher ed in a professional setting. Um, sometimes I just sit in these meetings and they start talking about numbers, and I'm like in this conference setting, and I'm just sitting there talking about numbers, like we need to see these numbers high, yo, like this and that, and I literally just space out sometimes, and I just sit there and I think, and I'm like, I'm really sitting here and I don't even know what I'm doing half the time. I'm like, you know what I sit there and think about? I think about the P1 Harmony that's happening in like 2 weeks, and I'm like, yeah, I can't wait for this P1 Harmony. And then they're like, Daniela, so what do you think? I'm like, yeah, I think we could probably do this to try to bring those numbers up for sure. Great idea. Okay, moving on. And I'm like, yeah. So I guess just like the thought of having like this professional job as a 24-year-old sometimes just freaks me out a little bit. And, like, right. I don't know how you feel about it. Because, like, obviously Kelly is, like, a little bit different because she's still, like, younger. Right. But just in general.
Like, just like, my job, I mean.
Like, do you ever just sit there and just think, like, wow, I'm really here working?
Oh, yeah. No, not gonna lie. A couple days ago, I was literally sitting there. And I was like, wow, I am right here. Like, where would I be if I wasn't here? Is what I was thinking. I'm like, where would I be working? Where would I be doing? Like, it's mind blowing sometimes. I'm like, I can't believe I'm here. Like, I just like space out and kind of just look everywhere. I'm like, okay. I mean, this is not really where I was thinking, but
right. Like, right. When people ask you too, that's another question. Like, when people ask you when you're in high school, they're like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Like, this is not where I saw myself in 5 years. This is not, if you go back and tell myself, my like 18-year-old self right now, like, hey, where do you see yourself? And that I would have told him, that 18-year-old, like, you would be right here where you are right now, like in this professional job. I'd be like, no, there's no way. And I'm just like, there's no way. I cannot be doing that job right now. Like, it's just mind blowing because like when you were 18 and you said that you were what we were gonna do in 5 years, like that's most likely not what you're doing right now.
Yeah. I always answered to be like 5 years older or 7 years older.
I mean, and obviously. Yeah. But like, you know, sometimes like students like they get asked that question. Right. And I guess people don't realize how fast 5 or 10 years is.
No, for real.
I think that like 10 or 5 years from now is I don't know where I'm going to be in 5 to 10 years.
Not gonna lie, for me, because you know, I'm older, I always think that. I was like, you know, in 5 years, where am I going to be? Like, am I going to have the things that I think I'm going to have? Am I going to be like, you know, I don't know, like, am I going to be more successful? Am I not? Am I going to, like, a lot of things go through my mind when that happens. I'm just like, I don't know where I'm going to be. And not gonna lie, it does scare me a little, but I try not to overthink it at this point. And this goes back to, like, the Bluey episode. Like, I love Bluey, just letting it out there. I love it. And especially if y'all seen the last episode of The Sign, that really got me thinking, especially if for all those fans that actually know what I'm talking about, and I'm trying not to spoil too much about it, but when Calypso, which is the preschool teacher of Bluey, talks to Bluey about, tells her a story, I remember that story, always. And that story, basically, the whole motto was, we'll see. We'll see. And I'm like, at this point, I'm just going to adopt that. I'm like, you know what? We'll see. Like, let's not worry too much about it. Like, you know, because I am constantly worrying about everything. Like, in me thinking about in the future, like, oh, what's going to happen? What am I going to do? Like, you know, I'm always thinking about all this. And I'm just like at the point where we'll see. We'll see. And I really like this episode because it kind of reminds me of that. Like, you know what? We'll see where life takes us. I mean, obviously, there's going to be ups and downs, and you're just going to have to wait and see.
That's true. And I agree. I mean, I know Michelle told me that already when we were like talking, but we were like about like you know, and that Bluey episode is kind of sad, but
it really is. I recommend all you guys to see it. But the problem is that you won't understand it if you don't see the whole episode, the whole seasons. There's like 3 seasons. You really have to watch all of it to be able to understand it. And even though it is it's really catered towards both parents and children, but mostly the adults. And I think a lot of you, believe it or not, will like, what's the word? Relate. Yeah. Like you guys would relate to like everything that's going on because it's so connecting, especially to the adults. And I really recommend it. I know people are going to say it's like, oh, it's childish or don't know, but watch it. Just watch before you judge and you'll see. You'll see. It's an eye opener.
You'll get sucked in. And it's really short. It's like super short.
Right?
So
true. I mean, especially for, I guess for who have kids, easy, just watch it with your kids.
True, yeah.
Like, a lot of parents have learned so much from it. But yeah. Anyway, but that's what I wanted to talk about a little bit. It's just like the professional setting, and like sometimes I think about it too. Like as a K-pop stan, I saw a TikTok about it. They're like, "Hey guys, I kind of forgot we all have actual lives. What are y'all doing?" And then I see like there's some K-pop fans who are doctors, lawyers, teachers. You know, and anything and everything. And I'm like, dang, there's really people out there that like we're all really like together in this, you know, wasting our money on these albums and concerts, enjoying our life, but still having real jobs, obviously. Right. Sometimes I fangirl about things on Instagram about like when they post something or something like that. And it's like, it's just something that I like to do to like distract myself from what I have to do on an everyday basis, like Monday through Friday, every day. It's usually not the same routine, but you know, something to distract yourself, and I'm sure the same with school.
Yeah,
right.
I have like a part-time job on during school, so it's like kind of, you know, like I'm doing my job, and then I get like really overwhelmed because I have to talk to people. And then when I come back, I'm just like, I have to do like this paperwork, so then I can like finally go back and then just relax or get clocked out and then go home. So just being able to be on like Twitter or Instagram or just like on TikTok or like any social media and it just pops out, it's like, oh yeah, this is what I'm looking forward to. This is why I'm here.
Yeah. I know, like sometimes so we are going to a concert very soon.
Yeah.
And I always forget about it, but it's actually pretty soon.
Yeah.
We might vlog about it just because like, you know, why not?
Right.
Put something out there, but like I always forget about that. Like
I have not even picked out my outfit yet.
Yeah,
I
haven't either. Yeah. So, but anyway, moving on. What is something else that I wanted to kind of talk about? Oh, okay. Here's a good one. So, okay. So this is a question that I kind of saw because you had sent me a TikTok about, So, okay, and I'm just gonna say how it is. Okay. So you sent me a TikTok of this Asian guy who said that he puts like #1 Latinas.
Oh, yes, I remember that one.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So, and I thought of this because I was telling Kelly about it, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna save this for the podcast because I wanna talk about it. And it's not to say anything, but we obviously you see a lot of statistics of people not glamorizing, but kind of like idolizing Latinas, right?
Right.
Like, for example, like the stereotypical Latina. What is a stereotypical Latina?
For me, when I think of that, I would say like probably like physically, it's, you know, the one that wears the big hoops, it has like the big lashes, the hair, nails, has the attitude, like, you know, what kind of attitude I'm talking about?
With that, like you describing that, that's what I think of a Mexican American Latina. That's what I think of. Hoops, black, straight, long hair, eyelashes.
Oh, you're right. Yeah,
that's what I think is a typical Mexican American Latina.
But like either way, I guess there's another question that ties in with it. When we see videos like that, like where people like any guy is gonna say like, oh, Latinas are so hot, like, oh my god, I love Latinas, like, okay, but what to that man, like, what is a Latina? Because technically we're Latinas,
right?
But do you consider yourself a stereotypical Latina?
No. Big no.
No, exactly. And that's why I'm like, when people say stuff like that, to me, it's like, but I don't consider myself like one of those Latinas. Like if you say, okay, yeah, I'm Latina by race and ethnicity, I mean, yeah, that's what I am. But what you mean, I don't think you like. Like, you know what I mean? Like, when they say to you, let's just say like, oh my gosh, I love Latinas. I'm like, you love Latinas, but you don't like me. Because I'm not just, what I identify is not just Latina. Like, yes, Latina is this persona, this persona or this person that you're imagining, idolizing, and that's what I'm saying. And that's not me.
Right.
So yeah, like you said, that's what I view as a Latina. Like a typical Latina would be like a curvy girl. I'm not curvy. Yes. You know what I mean? Like a curvy girl with like a good body, makeup like packed, and there's nothing against these Latina girls. Like they're beautiful. Right. It's just that is what is now considered a Latina. You know what I mean?
Yes.
That is the image of a Latina. But then when they say things like, and that's why I feel like when people kind of get surprised when you're like, oh, you're Latina, and I'm like, yeah, because Latinas don't all look like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
And that's what gets me a little mad when you send, not you, but I mean like people like that who make TikToks like the one that you sent me, where they're like, they rank the races, right? Or like,
yeah, because like, take a look at the picture that he put. What?
True.
How does she look like?
The typical, like, you know, the ones that like the lip liner and like draw the eyebrows and everything.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm sure if we did all that, we would look like that.
True, yeah.
But that's not who I am. That's not who I picture myself to be. And like, same thing. And like, again, I'm not saying like everybody does this, but like I do see a lot in the guy Asian community that a lot of them do like Latinas. And it makes me kind of sad sometimes because I'm like, I'm not that type of Latina that you are looking for, you know? Yes, I am Latina, but that's not who I think you're looking for.
Right.
Like, that's not me.
Right. And I would say like I don't think it even hits for them the same as in us viewing them that way because no offense, but I mean, tell me in your own words, like, you know, when you went over there, did all the guys look the same?
I mean, they have the same style.
Yes. No. Yes and no. Like, yes, they did, and no, they didn't. I see what you mean. Yeah. So my next thing is like kind of the same thing, and this is related to us because we're Latinas, and when we like K-pop, is Asian men. How maybe not just us, but like people view Asian men, specifically K-pop fans who view Asian men. And I think that's another thing is that, and if you don't know what I'm saying, basically, I feel like a lot of people kind of think that K-pop stans, they only like Asian men because they like K-pop.
Right.
And like, that may be true for some people. That may be true. But speaking on myself and us, I think, okay, first of all, I don't discriminate. Whoever I find is a good personality, then yes, I will like them and want to go out with them.
Right.
But I'm not gonna like just like somebody because
of their race.
Right. Because they're Asian and because I like K-pop. Right. And I think that's what people think.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Like, I told my boss back home, you know, and I was like, oh, because once she found out that I liked, you know, K-pop, every time there would be like an Asian man coming in, she'll be like, oh, do you like him? Do you like him? And I'm like,
yes.
No. And then she would be like, practice your Korean on him. And I'm like, I can't because he's not Korean. And he's not even, I'm like, that man's Mexican. You know? So I'm like, I can't do that. But then someone does come in, and then she was like, oh, why don't you practice? I'm like, first of all, that man he speaks Mandarin. He's Chinese, you know? Second of all, I don't want to do that because then I feel like that's like, you know, like racist.
Offensive,
yeah,
you know?
Offensive, you know?
That's weird. That's like if somebody, same thing, put yourself in their shoes. That's like if somebody would to come over and say like, hey, mommy, what's up? And I'm like, oh
no.
I'm like, no, you didn't. You didn't just do that. And like one of my friends, that had happened to her, and I'm like, she said she blocked that number right away. I'm like, exactly, because you don't do that. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Same thing. I'm not going to go to an Asian man and be like, annyeonghaseyo, or, you know, ni hao. And I'm like, that's so racist.
Right.
That's so racist. And that's so like, no. Also, I'm not going to like him. I'm not going to lie. There's some Asian dudes that are kind of ugly out there.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I'm not, you know, just because I like K-pop doesn't mean I'm going to, every Asian man, oh my God, he's so cute. No.
Yeah.
I think that's another thing that I like. I think relates to both like stereotypical Latinas and stereotypical like Asian, like for K-pop related.
Yeah.
And I think that both like tie hand in hand a little bit. And I'm sure for others as well. So I think that's something that like just irks me a lot. That just like, no, I don't discriminate. I don't have a preference. And yes, I get offended when people say things like that. Like,
yes, totally.
I don't just like Asian men. No, that's not it. I just can't. And I'm not gonna lie. I have, hopefully he doesn't watch this, but I have a friend, and when he told me, like, I wanted so hard to not tell him, like, buddy.
Once you told me, I knew right away. Yeah. I knew. I was like,
I have this friend, and he was talking to me, and I was like, yeah, we were just talking, and he's like, what should I get my girlfriend? And I'm like, I don't know. What does she like? And he's like, well, she likes BTS. And mind you, this friend of mine is Asian. And I was like, yeah, she likes BTS. And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, oh. And he's like, yeah, you like K-pop, right? And I'm like, yeah, I do. And he's like, yeah, she says I look like one of the members from BTS. And I'm like,
red flag.
Really? And I'm like, I don't want to tell him that maybe, just maybe, she actually kind of just likes you because you look like him.
Yeah, she was fetishizing him. That's
a little bit. It sounded the way when he was explaining it to me. I'm like,
right.
It kind of seems like she just like, why would you say that to your boyfriend?
Right.
I would not. If I had like an Asian boyfriend, I would not say like, you look like, I don't know, Changbin from Stray Kids, and I'm like, I would not say that.
But I feel like some of them take it as a compliment because like, oh man,
obviously, I know he did, and I'm like, okay, well, we're just gonna let you dream, buddy. But I was just like, yeah, for sure, and I obviously didn't have the heart. Plus, it's none of my business to say anything. Right. Like maybe she really does like him for who he is, and mind you, he is not the same Asian that K-pop. So he's not Korean. Let's just say that he's not Korean.
Yeah. No.
So I feel like that makes it 10 times worse because it's not even the right Asian. And like another thing that people always kind of related back to K-pop is like differentiating the differences between like the three main Asian races, right?
The Eastern Asians, right?
Yeah.
The East Asians. There we go.
So like,
because there's more Asians. There's
like the three main ones.
The three main ones are Chinese, Japanese, and Korean.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of people, obviously, if you don't know, I feel like, honestly, even some K-pop fans sometimes don't know how to differentiate. But to us, it's become a little bit more custom how to differentiate. Yes. Chinese from Korean
and Japanese from Chinese
people, like it's kind of there's some specific face features that help to identify them a little bit better, but obviously it does take time because I'm not gonna lie, when I first started liking K-pop, I could not tell those members apart.
It was hard.
The struggle was there.
Oh yeah,
I was like,
yeah, almost to look alike. Okay, are you sure?
And then I'm like, wait a minute, it's him. No, okay, it's that member. No.
Yeah, it was hard. It was hard.
No, but after you like fall in love with them and you don't even get to know like from the ear. It's like, oh, that's so and so.
No, that's so true. Like those TikToks would come up and they're like, who is this from the mouth? And it's like, I know who it is.
Yeah, same. Or the like, freckle or anything. Is this?
And I'm like, that sounds a little creepy, but trust me, it's not creepy. Yeah. But yeah,
even
so
for the shadow.
I don't know. I just wanted to touch on that. I thought that was pretty interesting because of that TikTok that you sent me. Just like, do you consider yourself a typical Latina?
No.
The answer is no. I don't consider myself a typical, what you would consider a typical or a stereotypical Latina. Like, we stereotype a lot of people. And it's okay to have stereotypes. That's another thing that me and my coworker were talking about is stereotypes. Like, maybe acknowledging that you have stereotypes. And that's another thing that I wanted to talk about is understanding that stereotypes exist and acknowledging that.
Right.
Like, for example, like sometimes we have these stereotypes on certain, races or even certain topics of something. And I think sometimes it's best to understand that you have those stereotypes instead of ocultando or pretending like you don't have those stereotypes.
Right.
Because I feel like that's worse than
like being in denial.
Being in denial is worse than acknowledging it. I feel like when you acknowledge it, it's a lot easier for you to overcome that stereotype.
Right.
And not fall into it, if that makes sense. So for example, like those are examples, is that stereotyping Latinas, like we all have a stereotypical of what we think a Latina looks like. And even us as Latinas don't consider ourselves like a typical Latina. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because we stereotype our own kind.
Right, right.
And the same thing with like another big topic is stereotyping Mexican men. Like we have the stereotypical Mexican men, the ones that are machistas. They don't like you know what I mean, like stereotypical Mexicans. So that's another thing that we talked about.
We can only talk about the Mexican men because obviously we've seen this in firsthand. So for example, the place that I work at, and I'm not gonna say where, they're always like, this woman is always talking about, she's Mexican obviously, is always talking about like, oh, I have to, do this and that for my husband and this and that. And I'm like, and it's normal. Like, you have to cook for your husband. You have to make sure you clean the house and all that. And that's something like, like as Mexicans, we kind of grew up like watching in telenovelas. I mean, we've all seen telenovelas where, like they're always like, the man is like very like manda. Like, él es el que manda, él es el que like, va a trabajar, trae el dinero. And then la mujer stays at home. And then, cooks, cleans, and everything. But the man is providing everything. Yeah. Provides everything. It's not just that he's, like, lazy or, like, what? No, he's a hard worker. But he is kind of, like, he has a temper. Like, most men have tempers. And then they also don't like being told what to do. So it's, like, it's like you're kind of, like, the domestic, alma de casa. Is like, like you're calm, Yeah. Like, you say, like, oh, it's like, do this. Like, yes, and you'll go do it nicely and all that. But... Yeah.
And see, like, that's what I mean. Like, we have a stereotypical, like, that's what we consider a stereotypical Mexican man.
Yes.
Is that, like, all of that. And I think that sometimes, like, when people, like, we ask, like, okay, well, then why don't you want to date so-and-so? Or, like, what do you think about this? And I'm like, well, no, because to me, they are a stereotypical Mexican man.
Right.
Like, and not that I don't have anything against it. It's just, like, from past experiences and understanding that isn't something that I want in my life.
Right.
And acknowledging that.
Yes.
As opposed to not acknowledging, and for example, and I'm not outing anybody out, but like using as an example somebody who never dates Mexican men even though she is Latina,
Yeah.
Or she is Mexican. And you see her never dating anybody from her own kind, right. Because she probably has trauma. She probably has her own experiences that she has had to deal with those stereotypical men in her life, yes. Right?
Yeah. And I would say like that means also like not dating wise, but observing. Like, yeah. I mean, come on, we all know a couple of these Mexican men out there like that. And growing up, we've seen it. We've seen it in other marriages. Yeah. We go to parties. You observe everything. You see how they act. You don't have to be dating. You already know, and you see the telltale signs, and that's why you don't want to date so and so, because you can see the signs clearly. Right. Yeah. That it's right there.
Right. And again, seeing the signs, not strictly saying, oh, I'm never going to date Mexican men.
Right.
No. Tampoco así, sino que like I'm observing and I acknowledge that this person has those characteristics that I wouldn't want in my partner.
Red flags.
Right. I wouldn't want that in my relationship. Right. And acknowledging that, right? Yeah. And understanding that those stereotypes. And I obviously as ourselves, I know we have certain characteristics that we may not like about ourselves, and I'm sure other people probably see, and same thing.
Right.
I'm not making myself or making us feel special in any way.
Oh, yeah, no.
Obviously, this is just saying.
Yeah, and we're not saying that all men are like that.
Right.
I mean, there are a couple good ones out there.
Yeah, for
that
sure.
are really kind and all that, but you're just not my cup of tea.
And the same thing with like not just Mexican men, but really in general, like any other race. Like I can go really hand in hand. Like I watch a lot of K-dramas.
Right.
And I've talked about this before, but I think a lot of people, like I watch them to, one, learn more Korean, to acknowledge, and two, to learn and acknowledge the Korean culture a little bit better, because it's something that I'm very interested in.
Right.
And I noticed that there's a big controversy on people thinking that K-dramas are glorify or glamorize Korea too much. And I'm like, I agree that in K-dramas, that's not always what happens in a relationship. Like Korean men aren't actually like that. I've seen on TikTok that people say like, that's not how they are. Like, you guys think that that's how they are, but sometimes some Korean men are abusive. They have anger issues as well. And honestly, I'm not gonna lie, I feel like Korean men are kind of hand in hand with Mexican men.
Oh yeah.
When it comes to those characteristics.
Yep.
And those stereotypes. So,
but like obviously when you go visit, you can't do anything.
Right. I mean, obviously.
But the thing is that like because they're in the K-dramas, you just see the goodness.
Right.
And I think that's the whole point of K-dramas at this point for them is just so they can be like falling in love with their own man, but they know the truth. Just like
yeah. And I'm like,
yeah, it's kind of like telenovelas,
Oh yeah.
But like I feel like with the like art like novelas, they actually show like machismo and everything like that.
They do,
right?
But like they also show like the sweet side. I was like, oh, but he's actually sweet underneath,
right?
Which is like
toxic, toxic, very toxic.
But then don't get me wrong, we are toxic too.
I
mean,
that's why you have people downtown with the little la toxica.
Yeah, for real.
I feel Kelly like was pointing at me a little bit.
La toxica here.
No, but yeah, I agree. And like going back to like glamorizing K-dramas and like saying like this is like we show what we want you to see.
Right.
Dude, there are some Korean men out there who actually are like really sweet and really kind and like just like every other race. Like same thing. It's just understanding that those characteristics, those stereotypes exist.
Right.
And like K-dramas aren't always all, love and
rainbows and
love and rainbows and showtime.
And this goes for like almost any race that I know of, just because like toxic traits look different in every race. Some are passive aggressive and some are actually physically aggressive. Others are more verbally aggressive, but it's all there. And I'm just
and understanding those and just acknowledging that those, but like I said, that's just a conversation that me and my friend had, is that acknowledging those is better than pretending like you don't have them, because then you have toxic people, or you have people that try really hard in a relationship just so that they can overcome their own Does that make sense? Their own stereotypes.
Yeah.
Right.
To try to, like, for example, if somebody had a stereotype over, it's like somebody having a stereotype over Mexican men and forcing themselves to be in a relationship with Mexican men just because they don't want to have that stereotype against them.
Right.
Yeah. And I'm like, I feel like that's why, I mean, like, no, you need to acknowledge that you have those needs and what you want in a relationship.
Right.
Like, stand up for yourself. Know what you want. Know what you're worth.
I mean, that's the whole point of a relationship, is to talk. Communication.
Yeah. Like, if you don't talk, then you're not going to have a good, like, relationship with someone.
See, and sometimes
that's why, like, divorce and breakup happen.
Yes.
Because they don't talk about it. Like, you have to talk about it.
But not acknowledging, and I think a lot of that stuff happens in relationships when they don't acknowledge what's going on in the household. Like, they don't acknowledge what's going on in that relationship or what's happening. You know what I mean?
Right. Like, it's like too late.
Yeah, at that point, it's just like you could have fixed that. Maybe if you could have realized a little sooner.
Right, and not be in denial.
Yeah.
Like, what was going on?
Right.
What was wrong?
And it could be a lot of things, but it's always that in denial. Like, you're just don't want to fix it. Yeah. Don't want to acknowledge it.
Yeah.
You don't want to, like, you always, like, they always want to think like they're perfect and all that. It's like, no one's perfect.
No. And I think that goes to show too, in every relationship, like, you need to understand that every relationship isn't going to be perfect, and you shouldn't want it to be perfect.
Right.
I think that's another problem. Like, you're going to fight with your spouse. You're going to do things. And I mean, there's going to be, it's like what you say in your vows, right?
Yeah.
Through thick and thin.
Through thick and thin, literally.
Yeah.
But understanding that before you get to marriage, maybe during that dating stage, really acknowledge what you want in your man and your partner.
Right. I mean, that's the whole point of dating.
Yeah. To, like, find out if you really want to.
Yeah. Sometimes it just goes a little too fast, but.
I know. I see people and then they're like, I'm getting a divorce, and I'm like, but you got married like 2 years ago.
Oh, speaking of all that, have you guys heard of the thing that happened with William Levy?
Yes, I saw a TikTok.
What?
You didn't know?
No, tell me.
Oh, girl, do you want me to tell her?
Yeah.
Okay.
Ooh,
Okay. So this is what I saw on TikTok, right? So
Okay,
okay. So según like the ex-wife, or are they still together?
I think it was ex-wife actually,
Ex-wife.
or I don't even know if
I don't
they're
know.
ex.
Who knows if they're still divorced?
Previous, let's just say, or I don't know.
They were in a relationship before.
Yeah, well, they married.
They're
They had
married.
a kid.
Married. Oh yeah.
I think
yeah.
I think they're still married.
Yeah, they're not fully
together.
divorced. Yeah, okay. So they're separated.
Okay.
So the wife
Yeah.
went to was at the house of William Levy there, and they called the police. The police were coming, and this is we're getting all this through the cam recording of the police. The body cam.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
Yeah. So they go in, and then resulta que the wife was trying to find out who was with William Levy, because they got curious. Okay.
Yeah.
Because the daughter was there of William Levy with the wife. Okay.
Yeah.
They were there, and they were demanding the officer to go inside, saying that he was on something. He was like under the influence of something, basically.
Like he's been acting a little weird.
Right.
Yeah.
But what actually happened is that the daughter said she saw her dad with somebody in the room, and that he quickly closed the door and said, "What do you want?" And she's like, I just want to go inside. And he's like, "No." And then he like tells her to leave, and she swears that she saw like women's feet, like she saw somebody in there, you know, with her dad.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's just go back a little bit. So they were in this huge mansion, right? This is where they live.
Yeah.
Mom and daughter actually don't live there with him anymore. But they came because they needed to grab some stuff or something. That, or dad wanted to see daughter, or daughter wanted to see dad, something like that, because they had been separated they're not living together. They wanted to go see. And because that's when the officer asked, like, wait, why are you here? It's like, the officer was kind of saying, like,
Pa que te metes, you know,
no, like, qué casualidad that you're here right now.
Yeah.
When he's
right.
He may or may not have somebody in there, basically.
Right.
And mom or wife was like, "This is my house. I can come here whenever I want. That's not my fault that he's doing what he like cheating on me, basically. Like that's not my fault. Like this is our house. Like I can come here when I want to. I haven't been here, and I need things." And so basically they called the police and so that they can go inside and be like, kick her out. I want her to out. And I also want to see who it is, because if he's cheating on me, I want to see who the girl is. And daughter's like, yeah, I want to see. And the police officer is basically saying, by the way, this is all in English, because apparently mom, that wife, speaks English. Yeah. Basically the officer's like, no, basically like, kind of like mind your business.
Yeah, basically.
Like, saying no in a way. And I'm like, that's kind of sketchy messed up.
Yeah.
And so while this officer is talking to the mom and daughter, another officer goes inside and talks to William Levy. And apparently he walks inside the house, and they cannot release that recording because it's under a private property.
Okay.
So everything that they talked about and everything that they said in that house, nobody knows besides William Levy and that officer. And then he comes out, and then two officers say, we searched the house. There's nobody. There's nothing in there. And basically telling the woman she needs to calm down. Like, you know,
yeah,
it's all in her head, basically.
Yeah.
And I actually saw another TikTok.
Oh, I only saw that one.
No, I mean, it doesn't have to do with that.
Oh.
Well, it does, but not really. So basically, I saw another TikTok, and this girl was saying, like, she's like, we all know. She's like, no, yo te creo. There was somebody in there with him. She's like, men are trash, basically. She was saying like that that police officer was covering for William Levy, like,
maybe,
because like she's like, I bet you he just went inside and just like did una like little scan así nomás, and he didn't go inside and actually check to see if there was a woman in there.
Yeah,
right.
Because it was 30 minutes, and I'm like, you can't check the house in 30 minutes and actually see like if she came out or not. Right. And she's like, qué casualidad that we didn't get to see the footage, like that we didn't get to see what actually happened and this and that. And, like, that girl was basically defending and saying, like, no, like, men are trash. Like, he probably did, like, that officer. And we all know how officers are, is what she was saying.
Yeah.
Like, yo creo que sí cubrió por él, and, like, this and that. She's like, no, yo te creo. And I was like,
yeah.
Actually,
I know,
wow,
like,
crazy.
Yeah, William Levy. The man of all telenovela dreams.
But the thing is, I heard that through the comments and all, they're saying that wasn't even her house. It's all under William Levy's name.
That is true.
But they're still married.
But they were married, and she was still living there. She had recently apparently got out of the house with her daughter.
Then
because that's the whole reason that she went back, is because I think they said they forgot.
But if it's under his name, then she has no right to go in, even if they were living together.
Okay, well, she didn't go in. Well, she did go in, but
But then he kicked her out. Yeah.
So I guess it's like I don't know, it's a hard situation to talk about.
I don't know. Are you trying to defend that he had a woman in there, Michelle?
No. I'm just saying, like, legally, if it's
which is why the police officers were like, we can't do anything.
I know, but the way the police officers were acting was kind of rude, though, too. Like, I understand that this was. I think they were a little annoyed at the fact that she called them just for this, which is kind of dumb. And I'm like, okay, yeah, but you don't need to understand that. Like, what else is she supposed to do? She wants this woman. Okay, well, I guess it's not his house, so I guess she can't say anything. But she wanted that woman out.
Right. I think she just wanted to know who was the other woman.
Are you sure the house is under his name?
That's what the comment said. I'm not really sure. They're saying that it's under his name. And that the girl was the one that was really upset, obviously, because she wants to know.
The daughter was really upset. But the mom, too, was kind of, well, she was like...
Because William claims it wasn't another woman. It was his son.
Yeah.
His other son. You know, he has a son, right?
Yeah,
he has, like...
Yeah. Crazy.
I mean, I'm not trying to defend him, okay?
No,
but I'm just, legally...
Yeah. That scandal was kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Wow.
It just popped out of nowhere. I was like, oh, I forgot about him.
That I know. When I saw it on TikTok, I was like, whoa.
For real.
William. What's up?
William, what are you doing here?
Literally.
It was really crazy.
Let's see.
Wow.
Anything else you guys want to talk about?
What else do you have?
Oh. I guess something else that we could talk about is like, it kind of goes back to like I mean, it ties in a little bit, but it's like English accents, no accent. So I guess, click it. It's kind of blurry. Having accents speaking English.
I feel like I do sometimes. I feel like if I when I get nervous, I stutter, and then like I end up getting an accent where it's like you can tell like I have a second language, obviously.
Yeah.
Like I hear myself sometimes because I'll be talking to someone randomly, and all of a sudden I'll like stutter with my with my own words.
Yeah.
And then it'll come out like kind of weird, and I'm just like with a huge accent. I'm like, no.
That is so true because I talk to a lot of my job. Basically has to do with talking to a lot of people, and I have to have long conversations with them. And sometimes when I'm talking and explaining something, I hear myself say a word so butchered, like that is not it. And I'm just like, I just keep going because I'm like, whatever. I mean, it's obvious in my name and like nopal en la frente that I'm Mexican, right?
Yeah,
right.
And I was like, yeah, I just said that, and I'm like, that's so embarrassing, but I don't know.
I also I have to talk to people, and I have a speech impediment with my R, so like I can't really, and then I have like a little lisp too, so whenever I speak to people, I feel like I always stutter a lot, so I'm like and then I'm like, I'm so sorry guys, and then they're like, no you're fine, you probably talk to people like all day. I'm like,
yeah, I always use that excuse.
I'm like,
I'm like, I'm sorry guys, I've just been talking all day, and they're like, no you're fine, and I'm like, yeah.
But then you have like some Hispanic people who are like, hablas español, ¿verdad? And I'm like, yeah. But then I'm like, pero también tengo el acento.
Yeah, and so like in Spanish, I feel like I have an accent. Maybe not a big accent, but I definitely have an accent when I speak Spanish. In English, though, I apparently, according to a professor when I was in college, which I don't know if I should take this in a wrong way or in a good way. I don't know if this was really racist, because at the time I didn't really think anything of it.
Right.
But after I explained this story to some of my other friends, they were like, that's racist. And I'm like, oh.
I was like, was it?
I didn't know that. So I was like, we were in class, we were in a lecture, and he was like, has anybody here, is English not their first language? And I was like, oh, well, me. English isn't my first language.
Right.
And granted, I was the only like Mexican in that room. Everyone else was white. I know there was an Asian guy behind me, but that man didn't raise his hand, and I was like, you whitewash.
For real.
But I was like, I like raise a hand and I look around and I'm like, nobody else? And I'm like,
put it down.
And then he's like, oh, really? He's like, English isn't your first language? And I'm like, no, Spanish is. I'm like, Spanish was my first language. And he was so shook, like so surprised. He's like, really? He's like, that's so weird. You don't have an accent when you speak English. And I'm like, I literally remember I was like, thank you. But in my head, I was thinking, I'm like, am I supposed to have an accent?
Right.
And I guess later, after talking to people about it, they were like, well, because typically people who English isn't their first language, they have an accent when they speak in English because obviously it's not your first language. And I'm like, oh, and I'm like, but I've been here. I was born here. The only reason that I feel like I don't have an accent is because, yes, Spanish was my first language, but it wasn't like the only language I spoke.
Right.
It was my first one since I was like 5 until I got into not even, kindergarten, I want to say, is when I barely started learning English.
Right.
And I'm like, and also Michelle, you being my older sister, I feel like we talked in English, and then Kelly came, and then we talked in English, but I don't know. I guess I didn't really know to take offense to that, but
like also it's like it goes back to that whole thing of like you learning a new language, and whenever you speak that language, you're like, wow, you don't have an accent. Right? Are you gonna take offense to that? You know?
When you speak another language?
No, I mean like, people on TikTok, right? Like, there's this guy, and he spoke Mandarin, and then they were like, obviously his Mandarin was like really good. Right. You couldn't hear an accent or anything. And then they're like, oh, do you know? Like, are you born? And then they're like, no. He was like, no, I was from the U.S. and I just learned it.
Yeah, but that's different. I feel like that is a good thing to praise because
you're learning
it, and the fact that you're learning it and you don't have an accent is like, wow. Right. But say, for example, say you knew Mandarin when you were little, like you grew up on that, and then you started speaking English. And they say, oh my gosh, you don't have an accent in English. And I'm like, yeah, well, obviously I don't.
I guess you're right. Yeah, it's like a little different.
Oh, I guess I think I see what you mean, actually.
Do you see what I mean?
I mean, the wheels are still turning.
Okay. I see what you mean, because I guess if it was that way, then... But I feel like it's not the same, because...
I feel like in his mind, he is basically stereotyping...
Well, I don't really know if he was, right?
In his mind, he was trying to be nice, but again, it's like really hard to, you know, be like... Oh.
No, but you know what? Now that I think about it, well, no, because you know what? Because the way say I'm like the one thinking about it. The way I'm thinking about it, it's like your first language is like, you know, like say, for example, Spanish. But then you learn the second language of English. He probably thought that maybe you came at a young age and that you should still have
I think so. Right. I think he probably thought I was like not born here.
Okay, think about it. Anybody that meets you right away and they know that you're, you know, Mexican some way, or at least for me, maybe it's because I really, really look Mexican. They always think I'm born in Mexico. And I'm just like, no, like when I went to college over here, there's like, oh, like you were born here? I'm like, yeah, I was born in California. And they're like, I thought you were born in Mexico.
Oh, Lord.
But like also, like when you go to college or like university or whatever you want to call it, there's a lot of international people. So that's why it's really hard to like...
That's still, though, stereotyping. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, they're still stereotyping you. For example, if I go right now to college and I point out every person there and, okay, say like an international student, and I see them and I hear that they have an accent, I'll be like, dang, they're not born here. That's me stereotyping that they're not born here. This is not assuming.
Right.
And it's the same thing. I don't have anything against it. I just sometimes I am a little bit like, you really assume, right? That I speak Spanish. And again, nothing wrong with it. It's just the assuming, stereotyping. And like, I get that. It's just that sometimes it is a little hard to just like get over the fact that you are assuming and you're stereotyping me to be a typical Mexican girl and that I speak Spanish. Right. Like, I have sometimes a lot of my people who I work with, not my coworkers, just like the families that I see, because I see families. They kind of just like, oh, I'm like they talk about Spanish because you do have to take that in higher ed sometimes in some colleges. Right. They're like, oh, you do have to take Spanish course. And they're like, yeah, and it's kind of hard. You know, right? And I'm like, do I? Do I know? And I'm like, yeah. And sometimes I'm like, yeah. But like, then again, I think it also depends on what where you're at in that field. But like, it's just so I don't know. I don't know. I have mixed emotions about stereotyping
accents like that.
Stereotyping anything like that has to do a little bit like with that. That's why I like to acknowledge things, and that's why I talk about acknowledging that you have a stereotype.
Right.
But to flat out ignore that you have a stereotype and say,
yeah.
you would know, right? And I'm like,
yeah.
Hold on. How do you know I would know?
Right.
Granted, my little business card says that. Speak Spanish.
Right.
But I haven't given that to you yet.
It's like you're just.
I haven't given it to you. You're just assuming by my name, by my how I look, like right. And I'm like, yeah.
That reminds me of that one when you were in college still. That your friend, this other friend, that he is Hispanic. But that the person, you should say that story. Tell that story.
Yeah.
That is a huge stereotypical, and that.
I honestly learned from that, and I feel really bad, and this is really my fault. But again, it goes back to, I think that's when I started to acknowledge that, oh my God, I have stereotypes. Like, I really stereotyped this person. I had a friend who in college, and their name was, like Mexican, or I assumed, I stereotyped that it was a Mexican or Hispanic Latino name. And I'm like, this person is Latino, right? And we're talking, and then I just always wondered, like, why don't they ever acknowledge that they are? Like, not that I was expecting them to, but I kind of was. And they never spoke Spanish. And I was like, why don't they speak Spanish? But I never said anything. A year went by, and then another year in college, and then they're like, I'm with another Mexican friend, right? And we're both all three of us are hanging out, and then that Mexican friend is like, hey, why don't you ever speak Spanish? And I'm like, why would you ask him that? I'm like, why would you ask him that? You're assuming, right? And he's like, oh, because I don't know Spanish. And I'm like, oh,
that
you
explains
don't? I was like, and then they were like, no. I'm like, technically I am, but like my parents never showed me how to speak Spanish. And I'm like, oh. And I felt really bad because he seemed to feel really bad about it. And I think that's when I acknowledged, like, I might have stereotyped him a little too much, because I started to a point where I started hating that person because I felt like they were hiding who they were, their ethnicity and their race. And I'm like, why you gotta be so rude? You know how, like, sometimes I'm like, you should be orgullosa de ser mexicana type thing. And I felt like I wanted him to be like that. Like, I wanted that person to be like that. And no, because I was wrong. I stereotyped that person to be like that. And I'm like, that's not who they were. Even though they would have loved to be that person, it wasn't up to them. They grew up not being able to do that. And I realized that, and it made me feel like, oh my God, I'm a terrible person. Like, I really said that, like, and I felt really bad. So they're stereotyping like that, I think, is where I learned from my mistakes and stereotyping people.
You know, but like, I learned from your mistake, because I was like, oh, I shouldn't do that. And one day when I was registering for classes, I saw a professor's name, and their last name was Hispanic, and their first name sounded Hispanic too. And I was like, oh, okay. But she didn't have a little picture, so I never saw if she was. School started, I entered the class, and I'm like, and I look at her and I'm like, she's married. I'm like, she's married.
She's married into it.
Yeah. But like, I also didn't want to be like, Kelly, don't stereotype. Maybe she's like our mom, and she looks, not Mexican,
Yeah.
And then I went in and we sat down and we were talking, and then like halfway through the semester, she was like, yeah, and then because we were talking about stereotypes, and she was like, yeah, typically a lot of people stereotype me because of my last name, and she was like,
you're like, there it is.
Yeah. She was like, I'm married, and then she took her screen out, and then she's had a picture of her kids and her husband. I'm like, I see it.
Yeah, like, there it is.
She was like, see, I'm married into a Hispanic household, so I got that Hispanic last name. And students stereotyped me because when they registered a class, they were expecting me not to look like that. They were expecting me to look like a typical Hispanic, dark skin, black hair.
Yeah.
And she was like, but I don't look like that. So then they stereotyped that I probably have an accent. I didn't have an accent. And then she was like, and one day a student came up to me and she was like, hey, I'm so surprised you don't have an accent. And then she was like, well, I got married into the family. Yeah. And she was like, also, you're stereotyping me, which is what we were talking about in the lesson. And then she was like, and it clicked for that student. Their race, they were white people. Yeah. So basically, I'm like, you're such a good example of stereotypes. Yeah. Like, you did such a good job including that into your lesson. Yep. Like, saying all this stuff. And I'm like, so that was for psychology. So I love taking psychology classes because of that. Right. And then this coming semester, I have another professor with an Asian last name and first name. Yeah. And I saw her picture. She does look Asian, but I don't want to stereotype. I don't want to stereotype, right? That's so true. I'm like, you know, because I currently right now have a friend, you know, and I didn't want to stereotype her either.
Right. Exactly. So. Just stereotyping and not wanting to. And I think that goes back on stereotyping people. Because, like, obviously, all three of us, sometimes I get told, me and Kelly we're not sisters. We're not siblings.
I'm adopted, guys. Fun fact. No. They found me under a bridge. Kelly. Y'all people would believe it, though. But look at my grandma. We both have curly hair.
Yeah, yeah.
The eyes, the facial.
That's another thing. Stereotyping, typical, like, what would a Mexican look like? Right. I'm like, you guys don't understand, like, if you don't know, like, and people who know, right? My mom is actually light-skinned, and she has lighter brown eyes. And right now she has dyed hair, which makes it even 10 times worse. Right. But she doesn't look like our mom. She doesn't look like our mom at all. And it explains why Kelly has lighter skin than all of us, and Michelle has darker skin, because my dad is the complete opposite. My dad is the brownest bean you could ever find out there. My dad is so dark. Part of that is the sun, but also he's just your typical Mexican guy, right? And I'm like, typical Mexican guy, white-looking Mexican, created these beautiful ladies. Outcome. So we, obviously, Michelle's a little darker. Yep. I'm, like, medium. And Kelly's, like, pretty white. Also, another thing is our skin, or our hair. So Michelle has naturally straight hair. Yep. I have naturally wavy hair. And Kelly has curly hair. Like, you would look at us and be like, no. Like, we get told we don't look like sisters all the time because we always hang out. Me and Michelle, though, on the other hand, we do get that resemblance. Like, yeah, they can tell we're sisters. And I'm like, okay, yeah.
And then, like, when me and Michelle hang out, it's only because we're bigger people.
Only.
Yeah.
But again, that stereotyping that we're not siblings because of we don't have the same features, right? Right. I'm like, no, you need to see our parents to actually understand. And even then, you wouldn't understand because you would have to see our family tree to actually understand for real that not all Mexicans look like your stereotypical Mexican. Yeah. Again, another thing, our grandpa is like white skinned and blue eyes.
Green eyes.
Green eyes. Yeah. Green eyes. Like, none of us have green eyes. No. None of his kids had green eyes.
Recently, my mom showed us a picture of when he was younger. That was a white man. that was a white man.
Literally. And obviously, that's what people would not assume to be a stereotypical, right? And so I think that goes to show a lot sometimes when in public too, when people kind of look at us and they're like, wow, they just stereotype us to be Mexican. I'm like, well, you're not wrong, but for you to stereotype is kind of rude. But yeah, like, Kelly kind of does get told a little bit that she looks a little Asian, and I think it might be her eye features. Yeah. Which my grandma from my dad's side actually has those kind of more almond eyes shape, which explains also, and she has super curly hair too, so explains the hair.
Fun little story. We went to California one time, and she was there with us. And if you don't know what a Daiso is, it's like a dollar store, an Asian dollar store from Japan. So we went in there, and it was us three, my dad and my grandma, and we like all split our ways. And I was trying to find my grandma because I was like, she's worried about this woman. She doesn't speak English. She only speaks Spanish. And I turned the corner, and I see her talking to another little Asian woman. Chinese. She speaks Mandarin. You know, the woman was speaking Mandarin to her. And I was like, oh, okay. And then they're just talking, having fun. And then the woman left. And I went over to my grandma, and I'm like, oh, hey, you're making a friend. She's like, yeah. I'm like, what were you talking about? She's like, I don't know. She just came up and she started talking to me. And I was like, but then that goes back to the whole stereotyping people. And I'm like, yeah. Oh. Right. But, like, imagine if I didn't know Mandarin and I didn't hear the conversation. I would, you know. Yeah. I would be like, That's not right.
And that's like this. And I'm not saying by any means that stereotype is bad, because we all have stereotypes. We all, everybody in this world, every human being has a stereotype.
And sometimes those are true.
And those are true. That is very true. But
I mean, we are a Mexican household with chihuahuas.
That is very true. We are those stereotypical people.
I always said never, but never say never.
Or like the Mexicans with the little bigote, you know? Like my dad. You know how he has a little bigote?
No, he has a full one, though.
But like...
Not like those halfies.
True. But like, they stereotype
not
Hispanic
this.
men to have like the big one. The big mustache.
That is true.
They do stereotype.
But we do, and again, there's nothing wrong with having stereotypes. It's just like acknowledging that you have them, because it's a lot easier to overcome them if you acknowledge that you have those stereotypes.
Right.
And obviously, like I said, everybody in this world has them.
Right.
Just acknowledging it. But going back to that story, there was one time that my mom. Are you good?
Yeah.
There was one time that my mom, I was in high school, and we were going for like a parent night. I can't remember, but she was meeting one of my professors, or teachers, I guess you could say, in high school. And my mom, again, like I said, she looks really white. We go in there, and I cannot leave this woman for 1 second, because I left her, and she's talking to my professor, or whatever. She's talking to my professor, and I'm like, Mom, where are you? And then I look over, and she's like, my professor's talking to her, and then my mom's just like, and then I'm like, and I run over there, and then she's like, my professor asked my mom's like, so how many daughters do you have? And my mom's just like, yeah. And I was like, no. I was like, Mom, that's not what she asked. And then I like button. I'm like, three. And I'm like, te pregunto si cuántas hijas tenías? And she's like, oh, yeah. And I was like, Lord, I was like, I cannot keep this woman away from me.
But I feel like every Hispanic, and especially Mexicans, are always like, you'll talk them in the English or any language that they don't know, and you're talking to them, all they're gonna answer is yeah. Like, it's hilarious.
No, dude, literally, we cannot leave our mom alone anywhere, not even in the stores. I feel like I always have to go with her, because people, and not that she doesn't understand, it's just that sometimes it's really hard for her to like speak English and like respond back, especially when they're having like deep on full conversations with her. But like one time too at Sam's Club, like they were this person asked my mom about some medication. I don't know why.
I remember that.
Why people are just so approachable.
Drawn to her.
I don't know. Because she looks white, right? Yeah. Stereotyping. Anyway, and he was just like, hey, is this a good medicine? Like, should I get this medicine? And my mom's like, oh, yeah. It's like, that's good. And I'm like, I was like, Mom. And then he's like, okay, I'm going to get it. Thank you. And he goes away, and I'm like, and then I go, Mamá, ¿qué te estaba preguntando? She's like, no sé, pero decía que el Vaporú, y sí que estaba bueno. Yo creo que para que estaba enfermo, quién sabe. And I'm like, Mom.
I was like, Mom, we're going to kill that man.
I know.
What if he said something about drugs? Like, you were going to give him another drug. You're not a doctor. You can't prescribe that to him. And I was like, but I mean, it was Raver Rope, so I guess you can't go wrong with that.
Right.
Just don't eat it, or like...
That, or that man was stereotyping Mexican. Who knows? With Vaporú. Who knows? Well, I don't know.
Like, Hispanics are known for like Vaporú.
I mean, it's the holy grail, so...
It's true.
Yep.
But literally, I don't know. That's a whole stereotyping and everything. But yeah.
Wow.
So I guess that's it. I think that's pretty good for today's episode. We're pretty good on time. We're about an hour out, so
I think it's nice to end it now.
Or did you wanna?
No, that's good.
You good?
Yeah.
You good?
Yeah, good. I don't want to make it that long.
Okay.
Yeah, for real.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Well, then I guess we can end it for today's episode. So, do you want to take it away?
Yeah. So thank you so much for watching and joining us. Please make sure to subscribe and follow our podcast on Spotify. And thank you for tuning in on Sisters
Talk
Chisme.
Bye.
Le digo, Ramón, ponte... Le digo, Ramón, ponte Vaporú. No, anoche sudo mucho. Ponte Vaporú. Y yo se lo tengo en la cabecera y yo tengo otro en la cabecera. Sí. No, pues dije yo, pues ni se lo pone. Déjame, le agarro el frasco y me lo voy. Y lo puse ahí en la esa, pues, para echarle, porque ya estoy haciendo el preparado, pues. Sí. Y ya dije, ahorita con este Vaporú acabarlo para la crema, pues. Y en la noche estaba. Dice, ¿dónde está el Vaporú? Y yo, pues, dije yo, ¿dónde? ¿Cuál? Aquí lo tenía en la cabecera. Ay, dije yo. Qué barbaridad. Ahorita que ya casi se lo quería echar a la olla, pues, al frasco. Y ya le digo, dije yo, pues allá lo tenía ya para echarlo. Lo bueno que no lo eché. Y luego, y en la cabecera mía ahí tengo el chiquito, ¿no? Dije yo, lo agarré y le dije, aquí está. Y no me dijo nada, de hecho está muy chiquito.
Dice, no, está más grande.
Y yo entre mí, mira nomás, tiene rato ahí ese vaporú, que le digo yo cuando está, Ramón, ponte vaporú. Ah. Y ayer que yo, pues, ocurrente, señor.
No, pues sí, lo bueno es que no lo echaste.
Y no me dijo nada, no me dijo, oh, el vaporú está chiquito, porque el que tiene está grande.
Sí. Pues nunca ponen atención. I never pay attention.
Ay, Dios mío de mi vida, yo me reí sola.
¿Todavía lo tienes ahí?
I'm sorry.
Ahí lo tengo, no lo he echado en el plato. Pero ya lo tenía ya ahí, pero lo tenía ahí junto porque dije yo, ahorita lo voy a echar y le voy a menear para así como te lo dije. No, y no, y dije yo, pues si me dice, no, y de buena que no lo, pues, dije yo, si me dice, le digo, allá está.